New playlist on Angular 2 final version, because we have seen a lot of changes happening in Angular RC5, RC4, RC6, RC7. Now we have Angular 2 final version out. So we will just talk about Angular 2 final, that what are the things now are in place, how to write the code of Angular 2, how to create the router, how to write the Angular forms. So a lot of things has been changed in the past couple of months. Now we have Angular 2 final, which is stable, and now you can start writing your code if you already know the Angular. So we will just, this is the webcast. I will be covering the important aspects theoretically of Angular 2.0. So just a basic overview what Angular 2 is. Now Angular 2 is modular. It supports modern browsers, it's mobile first, and it's complete rewrite from Angular 1.x. Okay, so if you try to compare Angular 2 with Angular 1.x, it's totally different. It may be inheriting some features, but it's totally rewrite, and now it's supporting ES6 with the TypeScript. What are the different languages in which you can write your code? There are different options. You have ES5, ES6. ES6 is the TypeScript, and finally you can also write the code inside a Dart language. Dart is also coming from Google. So we will be using ES6 plus TypeScript to write the code for our JavaScript for Angular components. So Angular component, Angular services, Angular pipes, Angular everything in Angular 2 is being represented by the class. So we have a lot of things: root module, Angular component, Angular directive, Angular pipe, Angular services. Everything is just a piece of ES6 class. So this is how in JavaScript now in the ES6 you can write a classes, you can write a constructors, you can write a methods. So all those things we will be doing with the help of Angular 2 TypeScript. So you can add a methods inside the class, and because we are using TypeScript, so we need to explicitly define that what is the type of brand, number, and what this method is returning. So you need to explicitly, because we are using TypeScript and it is static typing language. So wherever you are writing a method, declaring a variable, you need to define the type, like string, number, boolean. So with the help of TypeScript, we are also using decorators like annotations, component annotations, injectable. A lot of annotations we are using in the complete Angular 2 applications. Now if you talk about Angular 2 components, Angular 2 is also like a tree of components. One may be a root component, then other child component, then further we have a child component. So whatever the applications you are writing, you can create an hierarchy of the components. So it is same like whatever we see in the React. One is a root component, child, then further grandchild components. So this is the complete architecture which I wanted to explain. So template and component. I hope you know the basic syntax of a component. Annotation component, here we are selecting the what is selector, what is the template. So this is how the component and template will talk to each other with the help of property binding and event binding. Then we have the service component, which will get injected into the component. Component will access the data coming from the services, and these are the directives which we will be using in the HTML templates. So now finally we need to create a root module of the applications of our applications, and we need to get started with it. So how to write Angular 2 components? So first step is import Angular 2 core. This is coming from Angular 2 final 2.0. Then write the selector of the component, write the template URL, styles URL, whatever the styles you are using for this particular HTML. So you can embed the styles also, or you can embed the URL of that styles. Finally, we need to pass the module ID, because finally we are going to create a root module of the application. So you can define the module ID here. And inside this card component class, you will be writing the code for data binding, for event handling, for event emitting. All those things will be done inside this class. Interpolation means now how you will render the data inside this template. Inside this template, how you will get the data. You will get the data with the help of interpolation. you will have the user object in the ESX class. You will get a first name, you will call this get first name and all these methods, and these methods will get fired from the component. This is how we are doing the binding. So it has a huge, this is a big secret of Angular 2.0, that it supports a one-way binding. It supports a one-way binding from target to source, source to target, and also two-way binding. In basic terms, what I wanted to say that this one-way data binding, this is called a property binding. Property binding works from child component to the parent component. Event binding works from parent to child. Okay, so it's like a one-way binding from a different source, source to target and target to source. Okay, and then finally we have also two-way data binding, which is called as a banana box, which is just a combination of one-way binding and two-way binding. So it makes a lot more simpler. First we need to understand what is property binding, then we need to understand what is event binding. Just combine both of them and create a two-way data binding. So now let's talk about the inbuilt directives. We have in Angular 1.x we have ng4, ng repeat, ng if, ng show hide, lot of directives. So similarly we have these directives for the DOM manipulations. Might be a little bit different in comparison to, because syntax is a bit different here. For the ng4 loop you are writing let user of users and you are putting asterisk sign. So you are looping onto the users list and extracting the individual user data from there, right? So this is the ng class. This is you are using property binding to define the ng classes and all. If class.cool is true, then it will add this is class to your application. Okay, so now data flow, this is one of the important data flow, how the data flow is working for the property binding. So for the property binding, the data flow is happening from parent to child. So here we are doing a property binding with the users. I will be explaining each and every topic of Angular 2.0 in my complete separate tutorials. I'm expecting that you already know, so you can just brush up all the skills. So this is called a property binding. And when we talk about event binding, so this property binding is happening from parent to child. It's a one-way data flow. But when we talk about the event binding, it is happening in the reverse direction from child to parent. So how property binding is happening here? So this is this is the input output binding. You can summarize it like an input output binding. With the help of input you are able to do the property binding. So input user. So what you are saying that I can send this user as object from parent to child. It is possible through the help of with the help of event binding. I am doing one select method in the child component and then I am sending this to the parent component. So here I am sending the data from child to the parent. Users is doing some kind of an event, and this data user is doing some on select event or something. This data is going to the parent component. So this is also the one-way data binding. Data flow is happening from child to the parent, and this we call as output binding. Here we will be emitting in an event from the child component and we will be sending it back to the parent component. So these are the differences, how the one-way data flow is happening in Angular 2.0 with the help of input and output annotations. Input means you are sending the data from parent to the child. Output means you are firing an event from the child to the parent. Now when we combine both the things, then we will get the two-way data binding. Okay, nested components. So nested components are easy. What we are doing in the nested components, like user component, right now it's not a syntax of Angular 2.0. In Angular 2 final version, no need to define directives, providers, selectors, all these things here. You can define all these things inside a main module of your Angular. So nested components, you will be doing a nesting of the components like in the HTML, like user is a separate component. User component is a separate component, and the selector of user component is user. Then you can specify it like this. And here you are doing a property binding and sending the user data to the child component. Okay, so this is how the property binding is happening. Now, component lifecycle hooks, one of the important aspects. So in the component lifecycle, there are a lot of lifecycle methods: ng, on, init, on, change, do, check, destroy. So whenever your component is actually rendering, it is actually doing a lot of different tasks in the background. A lot of different methods are being executed. So ng, on, init is one of the methods. So ng, on, init we will be using whenever we need to fetch some data from the service when the component is being rendered. So we will be firing a service. We will be firing this method ng, on, init. Before that, you need to implement on, init. Now you have implemented it. Just fire the call to the service by dependency injection and get this data. So on, init is a method which is being executed first after the constructor is initialized for the component. Okay, so the final topic we are covering ng modules. So now Angular 2 is also now modular. In Angular 2 final, this is one of the big change, that they will be providing you the modular approach of development. You can have multiple modules in the application, some predefined modules, some user defined modules like HTTP module, form modules, reactive modules, reactive form modules. These are the different modules which are already there from Angular 2. This is a user defined module. So there are auth module, user module, login module, registration module. Finally, I will write my ng module. This is one root module of my application. Here I will specify that I am importing HTTP module, form module, reactive module and auth module of my application. Here I will do the declarations of all the components, directives and pipe which I am using in this whole application. So no need to declare the components, directives, providers in each and every component. Providers, you can specify all the providers here. So whenever you are specifying providers here, then that particular service can be used by any other component. But if you are specifying the provider specifically with the component, then that provider is available only to that component. Okay, so here we are doing a global declarations of all the components, all the import statements and all the providers. Okay, so this is how my app module will work. Here I have this app module where I'm importing the browser module and declaring the app component, and I'm also bootstrapping this app component. So here this is my main module, and for my application I have written this. So browser module is used for the bootstrapping process, so it will always be there in your application. This is your component. Right now I have only single component and I'm bootstrapping, so you also need to provide the which component I need to bootstrap, which I need to look at. So I need to specify that. So this is all about the basics of Angular 2. We will cover more topics of Angular 2.0 in the second webcast series. Thanks everyone.